Good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm not there. I tried to take the red-eye flight back last night to get back in time for class, but it's not going to work out. Weather delays and then equipment delays, and anyway, problems. So I didn't make it. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through a lecture via video, and Alexis will be in class, and she will be there to help you with your project. So first, let's talk about your project. You've got the project 2 that is that you're working on now. Go ahead and keep working on that. You're going to be building a slider today. I'll walk you through that, as well as you're going to have class time, and Alexis will be there to help help run the lab time there. Also got your DD-SLIX things, so if you turn those in and they just look right, then you get credit for those. And I'm still grading your project 1s, and maybe that's what I can do here in the airport. Let's go ahead and jump into how do we tell stories in a new linear environment that is user-driven. So this has been clicks, like click through a slideshow, or it's also been like vertical scrolling and kind of giving people digestible information. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. This lecture is going to be much more about the content than the technical. It's really important that we have great ways of presenting information in a digestible, understandable, comprehensible way. A way that lets people kind of digest it a little piece at a time, and then at the end of it, they've actually taken some things away from it. A key thing for us is we want to have great design that enables this. Applebee's or the art gallery? Which do we want to be? Think of Applebee's, it's a great restaurant, but there's stuff all over the walls. You can't focus on any one thing, and there's all these things everywhere. Whereas an art gallery focuses your attention, your eye, to the art, and nothing else is so distracting. We want to be much more like the art gallery in our design and presentation, and that's what a slider gives us a lot of times. But we still have to make good design decisions. So first, we want to make sure that we give a great presentation, and the user interface does not get in the way with the content. We want the user interface to complement the content. So do you use dots or do you use arrows? Do you use numbers? Do you use thumbnail navigation? Each one of these is a little bit different and has a different way and choice. And it's not that there's a right or a wrong choice. It's just what's the best way to present the information. For example, if you show the thumbnails, that enables people to jump around from slideshow to if you show the thumbnails, it allows the user to jump from slide to slide wherever they want. But you might have intended it to be much more of a linear narrative story, and then that kind of gives it away. The key components that make up a good gallery like this is strong visuals, good content, and that people actually learn something, and there's a story told, or there is knowledge gained. So let's start with the visuals. We want to have colors that complement our publication, as well as the content. We don't want it to be distracting. Typically, you don't see large, big spots of bright green. You typically see nice black or white backgrounds, mostly black on more photographic sites, white on more graphical sites. And the overall presentation, there's a real focus on that overall presentation to have great visuals presented well. That most of the time means large photographs or large videos to allow the user to not be distracted by other things. But that's not always the case. If the text is really important, sometimes you'll drive with that text. And then what's the content? Okay. What is our purpose? What's the point we're trying to make? What is someone supposed to get out of it? Is it just a random collection of photographs? I hope not. You only have a few seconds of their attention, so let's make sure that we teach them something. Okay? And the best way to teach them something is with a strong story, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Being able to carry them through the narrative. So introduce a character, tell them their struggle, and then bring it back to some kind of a conclusion. The other way we can go about this is we can explain a process or event, so it's more time-driven or linear in a way of this follows a specific series of events. So when you're editing these things, there's kind of three things that you can go with. One is a story in an arc, like I just talked about, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it carries you through it. Another way is chronological, just event-based and following exactly what happened in the time that it happened. So that if you're doing a story about somebody's day, you might start with the morning and end with them going to bed. It's very easy for people to understand that way. But then sometimes you have photographs that really don't have that much of a relationship. And think of photographs like pictures of the day. You might have sports photos mixed with world events, mixed with just beautiful scenes. And so how do you make those go through? And one of the ways that we used to do this at the Washington Post was through a tonal range. So if you had some nice blues on one photo and blue on another, you could use one to transition to the other and kind of keep this where you didn't have this jarring flash of change, but you had a kind of a tonal quality that carried throughout the gallery. So let's just take today's weekend pictures. This is from NBC News. Lots of companies do this. I actually used to work on this when I was at MSNBC. And I know their thought process behind how they choose the weekend pictures and then how they edit them. So first of all, they start with thousands of pictures they collect throughout the week, bring them together as a group, and 3 people come together and talk through the order and what's the best pictures and that kind of thing. So let's see if we can detect a little bit of their art from this point. So start with a nice opening picture. Doesn't matter what you choose, but here we have a nice little moment happening, and then we have a nice tonal quality. It's a nice even picture. So let's see what they do next. They're kind of picking up on that gray, but then bringing you in with some visual variety. So here we have the face, getting a lot of attention to the face, but it wasn't so jarring because you had that gray that kind of continued from one to the next. And then continuing to play off that background negative space here, and they have a nice, it's centered. They don't always do this, but they're going from one center to the other. So if you imagine your eye just kind of went straight down the page. And then they're kind of continuing with this center thing, and I think this one goes here because you can't put a photo like this right after a bombing or something where a child is in trouble or something. So this is one of those where you want to kind of find where does it go right after, because people will imply things when you go from one to the other. Then they go to the flood, picking up on some of those same colors, so the blues in the previous picture, and then this has somewhat of a water-like quality. Kind of like see how this the reflection here and then the smoke. Then continuing on, just as kind of a whole new picture, kind of I guess you say it's a scene change in the gallery, but that's not too different than this. Now the moment is very different, but look how these kind of have a cloudy feeling of mist and kind of that. So they're just kind of playing off of that. And then this is a total change, kind of going into a nice type portrait, but it's something different. You're seeing Donald Trump in a different way. You're seeing Mrs. Trump, First Lady Trump, very focused, but it's about both of them, right? And so it's a really interesting photograph. And here you just have a great moment. There's nothing about the order here. It just happens to be not a bad place to put it, really. But it's a nice moment. Something's happening. You get your attention. And then kind of following with that, both jaws open in the previous picture and then this one. Go into a scenic of the destruction and good light in the sky, and then here you have continuing on with the destruction. So this was not necessarily about the tonal quality, but more about just putting these two topics together. Then continuing that with a personal thing. So you don't want all scenics, you don't want all people, but giving me a moment about a person and how they're dealing with this particular issue. So having a couple pictures together, and then we're going to go international, show more of the earthquake issues and things that happened during the week. Great moment. One follows the other because of the subject matter. And this, yeah, it's nice and centered, and then coming in, my eye goes right to this child, right? Those two pictures play very well together and get your attention to where you need to see and what they want you to look at. Notice how everyone is looking in one direction, and it's easy for your eye to go right there. And then we have just a nice colorful shot, nice light, contrasting light. And then again, picking up on that contrasting light and the color. So these two were obviously put together because of that contrasting light and the reds. But I would have actually done it slightly different. I would have probably ended with this photograph and used this next to last. But this is not wrong. It's kind of it depends on how you want to conclude things. If you want to conclude your narrative where, things are pushing on and moving forward, then maybe you want the Lawnmower Kid. And if you want it where it's more, this comes to a dramatic conclusion and end, then you would go with this picture. Not that one's wrong, it's just how are you thinking about it. So when I say narrative arc or story arc or tell me a narrative story, and just to kind of give you a quick little review, we need a character, we need, our hero or our protagonist, we need somebody to carry us through. And so we want to introduce and understand the character. We also need some form of conflict. Great stories have drama and conflict, and we can find those in the visual world. And maybe that's just one picture that kind of brings us to there's a struggle, but it's about showing that kind of human emotion of what this character is going through. And then hopefully we can get it to a resolution. This doesn't always happen, but you need some kind of way of kind of concluding the story. And that might mean that life goes on and it has to continue, or it might mean this person is going to recover. But you do need to find some kind of resolution to people don't just think it was a random selection of photographs or it just ended and they felt left out. Great editors share what someone is feeling. Okay? Don't show me what they're doing, show me how they feel about what they are doing. Those make much more engaging photographs as well as engaging galleries. So we have the power online to be able to do multiple pictures all at once and let people consume it, whereas a print might have had 1, 2, or 3 photographs to use. We can really carry you through that arc, and we want to make sure we show the emotional piece, not just use a lot of pictures because we need 12 slides. So I want to talk to you and show you this example called Country Doctor. This is one of the most famous, probably first photo stories in Life magazine. If you look at this, this is the Country Doctor. You know exactly who to look at. For one, you can see everyone is kind of faced towards, pointing towards our doctor, and then he's wearing a white shirt, which is helpful to draw your eye's attention. The next photograph shows us a little bit more of that moment. It's building that character up, showing a little bit of motion. There's a little moment happening between the two. And then sometimes you need to throw in something a little bit fun. Everything doesn't have to be serious, and it's always nice to mix in something that gets the viewer to smile. Here's what I call circular composition. Nice, strong. Kind of move around the frame, go from the eyes to the hands to her hand pushing back up and the faces, and just all of this kind of keeps you circled. It's framed really nicely, and this is just kind of your continuing the story picture. What does the guy do? Right, it's a doing picture, and then now we start to get to more emotion. Look at her hands. Look at her look, and obviously something is some significance here. And he's continuing to do his job. And then for me, this is the one that does it. This was the cover photograph for Life magazine that time, and it's the body language. It's about that what he's doing. He's waiting to deliver a baby. That he's sitting here drinking this coffee, waiting for the right time, and he's tired, and all of that is shown in one single instant. Then we go back to a tight shot. And then the kind of traditional conclusion. Life goes on, he continues to move forward, and even the body language here is helpful. The way his feet happen to be positioned when it was captured, the way his shoulders hang, kind of gives you this sense that he's kind of worn, but he's continuing to. So let's look at a more modern example, this one from the New York Times. We have a story about women in combat. Notice that she has this step stool or this thing she had to use to be able to get up there. Just kind of introduces her. And then we get into this scene where you look around, your eye kind of moves through a scene like this. Notice her head is separated. This is an essay. This is women in general, so it's not one particular person. But we get to her very quickly, as it's really the only kind of adult face that we see there. And then again, we mentioned kind of circular framing. Everything's pointing, leading us to her. I think this could actually have been a nice a nice second photograph. And then now since we've introduced this as a woman, it doesn't matter um, that we can see and tell it in every single frame because we know what the story is about, and so we can already assume that from this photograph, and we it kind of gives us a scene, a sense of place, where is it located, and then here we have just a well-composed graphical pictures. You need to throw those in to keep interest and give visual variety. So here we have one to kind of it's just a beautiful frame. It's great light. It's well composed. And then I want you to look really closely at her shirt. And now we have a really nice just moment here. It's light, it's contrasty. Then follow that by a more brighter photograph, bringing us a moment of service here, and kind of this interaction between the two. There's a little bit of a smile on the face while you know exactly what she's doing. And then where does that fit in with society? So an example here is she is in here with the other men. And then another kind of just showing, you know, basically what life is like. Bringing back in between inside and outside, faces and graphic images, all this visual variety. Excuse me. And then here, hand in hand, they walk through this secure checkpoint. And then back to the portrait, and it just is just a really strong kind of photograph that gets your attention right to her, and you can tell what this photo is really about. And this is my favorite one of the gallery. Excuse me. This is my favorite photograph. I love this moment, kind of her touching her hair. I think you assume she may be asking about her hair, and I just love the smiles on everyone's faces. It's nice light, and they're moving well. And then, what's life really like? What do they do every day? It's a doing picture. It's not really an emotional picture, but it's well composed. And then this one kind of falls in the odd category, right? It's odd. It's not what you see every day, which makes it interesting. Okay, so she's fixing her hair, and a mirror in Iraq. And then here we have kind of the body language. We have women helping each other, getting through war together. And so this is just another scene. It's not what you typically see. They're out of uniform, and she's got flip-flops on, and kind of all that. And then this would be my ender. I really like this photograph. I just think it's a nice moment here. It just kind of shows you that how different life is. Also, you should know that whenever you put text in a photograph, people are automatically going to read it. So when you see a sign like that, you're going to read that. It doesn't necessarily contribute to the story, and it doesn't take it away, but just more as a point. So maybe you could have cropped that out. I like it the way it is, though. And then they went back to the continuing on, life goes on, go back to work kind of picture to end it. Thomas Cole's Voyage of Life is a great example of visual storytelling. When I saw this for the first time in the National Gallery, it was obvious to me that there was such a great story here, and I think it drove my wife crazy. I just wanted to stay here and stare at these photographs for so long. So let's dive into it for a minute. We have first a beautiful, well-composed image. We have great light. We have a character. We have the setting of the scene. We have this boat. We have this baby, and this baby, you start to see a little bit of there's a little bit of moment there, followed very quickly by the child growing. Notice the angel gets a little bit farther. Still a great scene. Notice the boat changes direction. You just have beautiful light, well composed, starting to tell the story of this voyage of life. And then here comes our conflict. Here comes that point where, that you're building drama. If the angel's farther away, you're starting to see the raging river. If you could see this in higher resolution, you'll see the boat's a little bit more worn. um, and something's about to happen, right? So we're building that conflict. And then he weathered the storm. Now look at the boat. The boat has broken, but it's still there. He's still there. And then the angels come back, right? And you have this great leading light that leads you to him, and then pointing back up, and you just kind of move up and down this photograph. And it's a really strong 4 frames to tell a visual story. Now I want us to talk about more informational graphics. And so these are not as story driven, although you do want to tell some form of a story, but they're not like photographs and like a video. It's a little bit different. You're trying to tell a story using graphics that gives you more information. So these are sometimes called stepper graphics. Now we use the scrolling method a lot, and so we want to try to explain something in a few steps. I say less than 10. There's no hard rule here, but I think more than that, you kind of lose people's attention. Okay. Now the way I go about doing this is I want to say, teach them one overall concept and then one cool tidbit, something that interests them, that intrigues them. I think of this as if you were to be sitting at a bar talking to your friends or whatever, and you say, you won't believe what I heard the other day, or what I learned the other day in reading this article. That's what you're trying to show, that little thing that someone might share to their friend. Now, most of the time, these graphics are accompanied by articles that give you more context. And so sometimes they can be used to lead people into the article. Sometimes people are in the article and leads them to the gallery. But ultimately, it's all about teaching and giving information. So let's take a look at a few. Here's one that is a linear story. It's told in a progressive way following timeline of events. And you basically just click next, and it takes you through. Now, they chose to slide one image through the whole thing just because of the particular story nature. But this is, when they do this a lot on the New York Times, it's just a single image that slides one, then a next image, then the next image. But same concept, they just move this through. So we have a really strong information that lets me see one piece at a time, just enough to learn a little bit at each step and move through. This is a click through. They don't always have to slide, but this is more of a stepper graphic. Now, the other form of this is the kind of scrolling graphic. We've seen these in the last few years become much more popular, and so, two-fingered scroll or using your scroll wheel, you start to see graphics. And notice I have the iconography on the right to tell me how far through it I am. This is obviously more than 10 steps, but they're giving me a little bit of information with a graphical view. A little bit of information and an image that represents it. Now this one I think is a little bit distracting.
I'll be here. Trying to get back before 10 o'clock.
And it continues. And you can do this for your final project if you would like. Now, how do you make one of these? There are lots of ways, and it's really about organization and thinking through the information. And there's this great blog post that I have linked in the slides today that you should take a look at, and I think it's probably the best example of how to do this. Now, obviously, you can go into much more detail. We have a whole class on infographics, a whole semester of it. So, this is kind of the kind of quick and dirty version of it. And not all of it will apply to sliders or scrollers, but this is really a great point. And it talks about organizing, doing your research, getting your data, what type is best to visualize this story, and it gives you some examples of timelines and process, which we've kind of been talking about. And then it kind of goes on to continue about how do you turn this into a story. And so this is a great example, and so I encourage you to go look at this and kind of study through this, all about design and planning and everything. So please check this one out. Let me go ahead and just kind of summarize this. The key things for when we do anything like this is we want good design that's a great user experience that doesn't distract from the content. We want visuals that are engaging, that involve you, that get your attention, and most of the time they're pretty simple and straightforward. Now, all of that must be built on good data, strong information that you've reported and you know is accurate. And then there is this kind of idea of how do you progress someone through it. We don't want to forget that we can use time. We can have it event or location based. It can be built off of experience, or it can just give someone some general knowledge. But you need some organizing factor that you've thought through of how you're going to organize your content. Go ahead and jump into actually creating this. You guys are going to be using jQuery plugins to do this. You're going to be using a slider plugin that you can find. So let me show you a couple things to watch out for. If you search jQuery slider, there are a lot of options out there, but a couple of them I want you to not to use for your project. So Amazing Slider and JSSOR, like JS Scissor, whatever. These two are kind of services that are built in, and they're like web-based, and so I'll show you. They look great, they seem to do a lot, and if you were just doing this in yourself, it might be the right answer. But when you actually get into it, you realize you're signing up for service and you're not actually doing any of the hard work. You're just using their web interface. So that's not what I want you to use for class. You're looking for what we'd say is a true plugin. So here's an example of one. This is called Box Slider or BX Slider. And so what I do is I just look and see, does it do what I think it should do? Is it responsive? That's a key thing. Make sure what you choose is responsive. This has exactly what you know how to handle, right? So it's got scripts, all of this. That makes a lot of sense. You see jQuery, you see the plugin JavaScript, and you see some CSS, just like we did on the previous last week. Then step 2 shows you this is how you put your images in, and then here is the actual slider that you need. Notice that it's in document ready. So if you already have a document ready, you don't have to make a new one. You can just simply slide this in there. So let's walk this through. If you go to the GitHub, you will see we have a sliders and your slider start. Okay. Now you don't have to use the slider I'm choosing. I'm just using this as an example to kind of get us started. And you see you have the index and the JavaScript. So if somebody wants to pause the video so everybody kind of gets this all set up, but you'll want to have an index file and then you have your JavaScript. Alright, so here I have the index file open. It already has Bootstrap enabled there, and if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see jQuery is already there, version 3, and then there's like a little JS file for some other things, but you can just leave that there. And so if you're back on this documentation page, here's the things we need to do. We don't need to copy jQuery. jQuery is already there. This is version 1. Version 3 should work with version 1. And all we need to do is copy this one. So we're going to copy that. Go to the bottom of our page. Remember, plugins always have to come after you have jQuery. So here we have the Bootstrap one, and then after that, I'll just go ahead and put this in. Okay. We need to do a couple things here. One is, I didn't realize it, we need to get the Bootstrap file. So this says it's in here, so it should be in JS Bootstrap min.js. So we'll deal with that in a second. And then notice that we've added this into jQuery box slider min. Okay, so if I open my JS file, that doesn't exist. So we need to go get both of these. First, let's go ahead and get the Bootstrap file. If you're on the Bootstrap page, so you're at the getting started, click on download, and you'll see there's the JavaScript right here. So you just need the URL part. And you switch back and paste that in. Now, this plugin, notice we're using a CDN for this. This plugin's not going to do that. There's no CDN available for this particular plugin. So what we're going to do is host it locally. So we need to go find that. So if you go back to that documentation, bxslider.com, you look on here, you see something says download. I don't see it. What I used was go to view on GitHub, and then the distilled folder, DIST, whenever you see the distilled folder, that's where you're going to find all these. And so there it is, the JS folder and the CSS. So let's just go ahead and go back. The easiest thing to do is to just click clone or download, and you can download the zip. then in there in that distilled folder you'll find what you need. So let's move that to, we need this min.js, and we're going to need the CSS. And I probably should have copied those rather than move them, but you get the idea. And that should be it. Notice I put the CSS in the CSS folder. And now you have JS, jQuery, JS, jQuery, box slider, min.js. Okay, so we'll save that. Now let's go back to our documentation. We've got everything set up. Also go ahead and do your style sheet, and then you can just walk through and add the images. Now I don't have images. You're going to need to go ahead and get your images and follow this through, but you'll basically build some HTML of where you want the slider to be. Here we want right after the nav inside the container. We'll just say we'll put it right here. So this is where our slider would go. And then the last step we need to do is to have that document ready. So if I already had document ready, I would just copy that one line in the middle. But here, I'm going to go ahead and just paste it in. And it's looking, let's make sure we understand what it says. jQuery, select box slider, apply the box slider function to the box slider class. So let's go back and look at our index and make sure we have a class called box slider. Look at there. Class box slider. So it's good. So if you change this to slideshow, you would just have to change it here to .slideshow. Okay. But I don't recommend that. I'd say just keep it to whatever the documentation is. Sorry. Messed that up, didn't I? Alright. And so once you've done your CSS and everything, that should work. This was just to kind of walk you through, make sure you got all the steps. You need jQuery, you need the plugin, and you'll need some HTML, and you'll probably want to call that function at a document ready state, and that should be the same for all plugins. So you can use this one or you can use another. I encourage you to find whichever one you want. So start out on your project. You might want to just duplicate that folder that's in the GitHub repository for today's class. That's a Bootstrap setup. It's got a JavaScript file and everything already connected. You can use that as your base. Then start adding your plugin. And by this point, you really want to know what your topic is and that you're moving forward on your project. Let Alexis know if you have any questions. And then after today, you can email me or send a GitHub issue. Issues best. I'll be happy to help. Thanks. See you soon.